Hello, everybody. Good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is a special one. We're starting um, our next class called Virtual Learning Pedagogy. This is under the initiative of Codarina Education and Technology Foundation. Uh, uh, the program, the continuous personal and professional development and training program of the organization, I mean of the foundation, and it's really going to be a fantastic time today. So before I get calling the facilitators, okay, let me first show you. So the facilitators that I'm going to give a roll down of what we're going to discuss about. So I have Jane Moore and Jenny. They are going to be facilitating for us today. So get ready for a fantastic time. So, but before we get into the details of what we are here for, yeah, this is a 6-week course, and it's going to be run on the Codarina Learning Portal. The Codarina Learning Portal is Moodle based, and we've got a whole lot of things arranged on the CLP. The courses are going to be there. You're going to be reading your materials. You're going to submitting pretty your assignments and what the facilitators already have in stock for you. So you are supposed to enroll on the learning portal. And if you have not been able to enroll on it for whatever reason it is, then we'll sort that out after this session. So this session is going to this is an introductory section, and it's going to we're going to start with it, and then throughout the week you'll be expected to check into the materials and the content on the CLP, and for you to be able to follow up with the resources. There have been some fantastic resources you're going to see, and you know the topic of what we're dealing with this week is introduction to teaching and learning online. So you won't want to miss that for anything. The facilitators have packaged some fantastic resources for you. So without much ado, I'm going to bring the first facilitator to speak to us in the next 20 minutes. She's Jane Moore, and fortunately our presentation is also on the Codarina Learning Portal. And this video is also on the Codarina Learning Portal. So remember, you have to get registered on the Codarina Learning Portal. So we are going to be available even after this to be able to sort out any issues that you have. You can actually send to hello@codarina.org or john@codarina.org for that matter. So we will be taking up your questions, and we'll be resolving everything for you to be able to access the Codarina Learning Portal. So every of the week we're going to start on a Saturday like this, and we will start with a video presentation like this. It's going to be a synchronous. We're going to start with a synchronous session. So, and people can still register. Registration is still going on. You can still tell people. We're going to share it on the links or on the chat box for you to be able to see how people to register and all that. So thank you for coming around today. We really appreciate the time, and we are going into class shortly. And don't forget that you're watching this on YouTube Live. You can actually make sure that you subscribe to the Codarina channel on YouTube Live. So on YouTube. So thank you very much for coming around, and we're going to start class now. So I'm going to bring in Jane Moore. Jane, you're welcome.
Okay, I've got my up.
Okay, so I'm bringing it on. Yeah, so you can. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Well, hi everyone. I'm really pleased to be here with you today. My topic is organizing your course, and I know that for me at least, using a PowerPoint or some kind of tool to keep myself in line is really important to me, because it's very easy to start talking about something and losing your bearings in your course. So that's one clue that I might give you right from the start. The second thing to do before you're teaching online, of course, is to plan your content. Now, you do this if you were teaching face-to-face or online, but I think it's important to go over those important steps to take before you start to teach. First of all, you need to consider what it is that you want students to come away with. So if you haven't written your objectives for the course, I would write them first. Now, what is it that you want students to learn? And what are the important milestones you want students to achieve? Those things are going to help you decide how you organize your course and how you plan your assessments in the course. In other words, if you want students to be able to do a certain task, how are you going to determine if they can do that? Now, in a face-to-face class, of course, that might be a little bit easier because you can physically see them do it in front of you. However, in an online course, you might have to think about a way to assess the student's knowledge in a way either by a video or by a written exam, or however you are tasked, or a project. You want to think about how you're going to determine if they've met your objectives for the course. So, what kind of tests you would have or examinations, what kind of projects you would have the students do. Are you going to have the students work as a group? Are you going to have them work as individuals? If you have them work as a group, you need to think about how you're going to assess them. Are you going to give everyone in the group the same grade? Or are you going to have students individually submit parts of the project to you and grade them on what they have done? The same thing is true of individual work. How are you going to assess what the students do and whether or not they are actually learning what you had in mind for them? The other thing you want to think about in assessment is how often are you going to do it? Are you going to do it weekly? Are you going to do it monthly? Do you have a semester length thing where you're going to do it midway and then at the end? All these things need to figure into the planning you make for your course. I'm a firm believer in having all that spelled out for students in as clear a way as possible. And with that in mind, the idea for me is that you create your syllabus with your online student in mind. It's so important to make your syllabus friendly and phrase things positively. So often we see syllabi that tell students what will happen if they do things wrong, and it gives the students a real negative impression. I've put up in the content for this week Tulane University's accessible syllabus. It really changed my whole approach to writing syllabi for students, because it's a positive way. It's a way that gives students the message that you really care about them and you care about their learning. And I think that's what you want students to know ahead of time. You also want to set really clear expectations and deadlines. Just because you're positive and empathetic doesn't mean that you don't want to set up things. This is especially true with discussion boards. I find that if you don't set deadlines for discussion boards, everyone waits till the end of the week and there's no discussion. There's only individuals posting. So when I taught online, and I started teaching online in 2002 and finished teaching online in 2018. It was really clear that my students had to do an initial post by a Wednesday, for example, and then had to do their follow-up post by Saturday, so that everyone knew that between Wednesday and Saturday, there were going to be things to react to. If you don't have that initial post deadline set up, then everyone waits till the end of the week, and again, there's no discussion. Another thing to do in your syllabus is make it clear that you will be available to answer questions. So for example, you can say, I log into the course every morning, or I log into the course twice a day, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that come up. Or you might say, the easiest way to reach me with a question is email. On the other hand, you might think about the fact that if a student posts a question, that student is not the only person with that particular question. And so your response to them may eliminate 5 or 6 or 10 questions that are the same from other students. Again, it's a decision you have to make, and you have to consider your time. It's really, really easy to get sucked into an online class and be online for hours at a time and not feel that you can ever step away from it. So I think it's really important that you make it clear to students what your expectations are, what the deadlines are, and the fact that you're available to them. One of the things that I learned about in a conference was to do a walk through the syllabus. For many of us, the first day of class, we talk to students about expectations for the whole year. We look at the syllabus with them, we tell them what we expect, and so on. But in an online class, we post the syllabus and hope for the best. So one of the things I did was a YouTube video called Walk Through the Syllabus, and I looked at the syllabus the same way I would in a face-to-face class. Talked about expectations, talked about ways to get in touch with me, talked about each of the assignments. And that way, the students can always go back and listen to it and watch it again and see, maybe answer their questions before they have to ask you the same question over and over. In doing your syllabus, you want to make sure that any assignment you give students is clear. They know what is expected. They know when it's due. Again, I learned to make a walk through the assignment so students could revisit that. In terms of what's expected, I always created a rubric for every assignment telling students what was expected, what was the baseline grade, what was a higher grade, what was the highest grade. In other words, what should they do to attain whatever grade they wanted to get in the course. And that, while it does take a lot of upfront time, it makes your grading so much easier. Another thing that is helpful in an online class is to make a class calendar as part of the syllabus so students know what's happening when and when those deadlines occur. You can even send out messages. Don't forget that your assignment is due a week from today, or closer in, you have the deadline for the assignments is tomorrow at midnight. Be sure that you complete by then. Also, you need to recognize that technical difficulties happen and be empathetic. When you're teaching a face-to-face course, what often happens is that you have students come in and say, you know, my computer broke and I couldn't print it out, or my dog ate my homework, or many of the other excuses that we've all heard in our teaching careers. When you're teaching online, those technical difficulties can happen and happen frequently. For example, you may be in the middle of doing an assignment and the power goes out and you lose your work. One way to deal with that is to recognize and tell students that you need to save your work constantly so that if the power goes out, you have the material. One of the things I tell students in an online course is if you're getting ready to post in a discussion board, write out your post in a Word document or a Google Docs document, and then copy and paste it into the discussion board. That way, if the power goes out, you still have your comment and you can put it in later when you're able to access the course. None of us like to have a student always have excuses, but recognize that if we treat students with kindness, that they will do their best. And I think that's one of the important things in an online course, is to set up a community where people trust each other. So how do you connect with your online students? I think the first thing is that you introduce yourself with a picture and information about yourself, and you ask your students to do the same. I think it's important that you respond to each introduction. And I usually put a disclaimer saying, I don't expect you all to respond to each person who comes into the class, but I will, just as if I were in a face-to-face class, I'd say hello as they walked in the door. So I do respond to every introduction in my online classes. I try to use the student's name and find some kind of connection. So I might say, oh, I have a dog too, or my sister studied art. My sister's a graduate of that university. Just some way to make a connection with the students. Then I make a copy of the introductions, or at least jot down information about each student, so that when the student is responding in class, I know who is responding. I know something about them. For example, I had a student one time say that one of the issues she was dealing with in the class is that her mother was very ill. So from time to time, I would just write her a little note and say, how's your mom doing? It makes people feel that you care. And of course, if you're an educator, you do. I think it's also very important, and I have to admit, this is something I learned way down the road in my online teaching, is to set expectations when you're available. When I was teaching at National Louis University here in Chicago, we did a survey of online students, and we talked to them about what their expectations were for getting papers back that had been turned in, or projects, and getting responses from their professors. Surprisingly, or maybe not, they expected that papers would be returned within 24 hours, and that teachers would reply to any of their questions within several hours. That's just not humanly possible unless you sit at your computer all day long, and none of us have that luxury. So set expectations. I'll be checking the questions once every day and once on the weekend. If you need me immediately, email me and I'll respond within 24 hours. It may seem harsh to you, but it's an important part of self-preservation. Trust me on that one. Always remember, and I think this is just part of being a kind human being, be generous with giving students leeway on assignment deadlines, but also remind them that they have to check in with you before submitting a late assignment. If a student writes me and says, I'm just overwhelmed, I can't get it in by Friday, what I usually say to them is, when do you think you can turn it in to me? And if they say something reasonable, like in 3 days, I say, fine, that works. If a student turns in an assignment late and hasn't checked with me, I often write them an email, a personal email, and say to them, I didn't notice that you asked for an extension on your paper. Did I miss it in the email? And then they will either say, no, I forgot, or whatever, and I'll tell them that that will be reflected in their grade. So on the other hand, you want to keep some sort of balance with what's expected, but you also need to be caring and kind and think about your students and what they're going through right now. So that is sort of the gist of what I was talking about. I know that some of you will have lots of questions, and some of the things that I've said may not apply to each one of your situations, but I hope that you will think about these things, that you will look at the content that I put up in the module for this week, and after you've looked at it, think about any questions or concerns that you might have. Okay, John, I'm turning it back over to you.
All right. So that was a great start up from Jane, and thank you for what you've actually done to really give a presentation of how it's going to look like for learners to actually, I mean, for teachers to float an online class. A whole lot of, okay, I think there's a question there. Okay, yeah, okay, it's Karen that's showed something that as much as possible, online classes might be similar at some point, but they are always very different from face-to-face classes. And that's one of those things that you've actually shared. So now the presentation of Jane is on the module. And then if you have questions that she will attend to, please, she's still going to be here after the next session so that she can actually answer your question. So thank you, Jane. So we'll back at you shortly.
Okay.
So I'm bringing on Jenny. Yeah. So Jenny, you're welcome.
Hello,
Yeah.
everyone.
So you can have the floor.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Before I start sharing my screen, hello and welcome to everyone. It's a little bit, it's a little challenging that I don't have as direct a relationship with you. I'm broadcasting a little bit, but I look forward to hearing your questions and seeing your comments and just talking through some of the things that I'm talking about. So Jane started us off with the really, with a lot of really good practical suggestions for the how-to of online, and those are so important. It's a good way to start or get off and running. For my presentation, I'm going to pull back a little bit and talk about some of the higher level ideas about why should we even be teaching online. So many of us have, hang on, I just want to shuffle my screen a little bit so I can see. There we go. That just took a moment. Great. So I just want to talk a little bit about why teach virtually. We're human beings and we love to be face to face, and we love to see each other and hear each other and be able to look in each other's eyes and talk about things that really excite us. And so when we teach virtually, some of that starts to shift and it becomes a little more challenging, sometimes a lot more challenging depending on your internet connection. So welcome, and it's so nice to meet all of you, and I look forward to spending time with you during this week as part of the course, facilitating discussion and other things we're going to do together. All right, I need to just be able to go to the next slide. So a little bit about me. I live in Sudbury, Ontario, Canada, and that is about 5 hours north of Toronto, if that helps you at all figure out where I am in the world. I'm very privileged in so many ways, but to live in Canada, to live in a small city in Canada, where we have not had as many problems with coronavirus as some other places have. I have been practicing educational technology, instructional design, open educational research and practice for many years, but have also been an online student for the past 8 to 10 years, working on a master's of education, a doctor of education. So I really understand the student learning perspective in an online context. This is different, obviously, for students, especially students in primary school, the very youngest ones. Learning online is an extreme challenge for them. Secondary students, a little less so, but still quite challenging. As we get to post-secondary, it's a little better in terms of access and things like that. Please feel welcome to connect with me in the course shell for this course and through my email, and those are shared in my presentation as well. Sorry, I'm not getting the hang of moving my slide along. Bear with me. Oh, I know what it is. It's that. So the first thing I want to talk with you about is why virtual, why teach online, what's important about that. And I'm going to look at my notes a little bit as I go along, so I don't want to forget something that I laid out for myself. And again, this is about organization that Jane talked about. So this shift in 21st century economies and how they're managed and what's important to them has involved technology at a very high level, especially around how information is shared, important information for things we need to learn and things we need to manage. It has become very important to be digitally literate. And that is important for all human beings from a very young age to the very oldest. I have lots of good friends in their 90s who love their computers as a means of communication with their families and friends. To understand how to use technology and how to find and share accurate information. And that couldn't be more important as we talk about coronavirus and other global issues, sustainability, climate change, those things. We need good science and we need to know where to find accurate information. Online empowers connections with diverse humans across the world. So 15 years ago, this session would not have been possible. It would have been very difficult for me without traveling to meet you and to talk with you. And so it creates, and to learn from you, more importantly. Online empowers access to diverse knowledge. So the internet, developed countries, access to computers, all of that has been very privileged and very white for a very long time. And it has become extremely important that more diverse voices, people of color, people from economically developing nations who have such great knowledge to share, are able to do that more easily. And that's one of the things that virtual empowers, which is really one of my favorite things. Online learning can be flexible in terms of time and place. And again, this depends on your access to the internet and devices. But it creates a situation where if you have the time and can have downloaded a podcast or downloaded something to read, you can do it anywhere, especially commuting. So if we're going back and forth to work. And then a pandemic happened, and this has had a shocking impact on privileged people. So in people in economically developing nations, they have had a very spotty access to internet, not access to devices. So they are extremely well equipped to be resilient and to find ways to learn. It's been rather a shock for developed nations to have to figure this out very quickly. And then human-to-human contact in this pandemic has become dangerous. And so we almost have to go virtual. And rather than going virtual, complaining about it and worrying about it and feeling super challenged by it, I want to talk with you about ways that we can talk about it in a positive way. Why go virtual is a very positive thing. So again, I do want to acknowledge, and I think it's really important, especially when designing courses for secondary learners everywhere in the world. What about those who don't have access? And so lack of access is what we call a wicked and complex problem in the world. And again, it will be familiar for many of you, as it is now for us, even in Canada. And so again, we're learning how little access there is for rural learners in Canada, how restricted access can be for our Indigenous First Nations on their reserves in Canada. We're trying to help them learn, but then we realize they don't have internet access on a regular basis. So as educators, when we create learning materials, thinking through how can I create this in such a way that if a learner only had access once per week, they could download, share, read, and use those materials. So I try to think about that when I'm designing things. So if it's important to create virtual learning for the reasons that I walked through, how can it be created well? What is good about it and what is great about it? And the things that Jane described and discussed for you, ways that you can design well for your online learners, ways that you can design empathetically and with great care for your learners are some of the ways I want to talk about how that gets designed well. So one of the things that I'm going to hang my hat on for my talk quite a bit is this idea of affordances. And it's a big word, and it just means what works well in online environments. And in fact, what works well in online environments that's almost hard to do in face-to-face environments. So there's some things that online and virtual environments do really well that we can't even do in face-to-face teaching and learning and interactions with humans. So I want to, again, highlight that positive idea about what works well in online. And it's, there's a lot of big words in this. So this comes from a presentation by William Cope and Mary Kalantzis. They are Australians, and they have been talking about this idea of the affordances of e-learning, why e-learning has really some really great features to it. So the first one they talk about is ubiquitous learning, which means you can do it anytime, anywhere. And then this young woman pictured in this is using her play tablet and riding her bike at the same time. So she's playing, learning, riding, which I wish I could do. If I had a tablet on my bike, I might go biking more often. But humans are learning creatures. This is not new. So how do these digital affordances magnify the opportunity for learning anywhere, anytime? So personal computers are a game changer for humans in terms of formal learning, and students can move in and out of classroom spaces if they have access to a device without having to worry if it's happening at a particularly scheduled times. In terms of informal learning, there's all kinds of learner choice. And if I don't know how to fix my dishwasher, I go to YouTube. Lots of humans do that now. If I'm not sure how to do something, I need to learn how to use, a Photoshop a little bit better, I go straight to YouTube, and it's quite an amazing thing. Mobile devices are certainly a game changer, and certainly a very, very important device in economically developing countries where again, there's commute time. This is true everywhere, but there's commute time. There's time for interacting with friends and learning with and from friends, which is still important, but mobile devices really make that much nicer. This access to more experts, diverse opinions, and media-rich information. I can watch a video on YouTube from Sir Ken Robinson, one of my favorite educators, very easily. I don't have to connect with him. I don't have to meet him in person, but I can learn from him. And so some of these learning habits that we can think through and partner with our students to try and develop a little better are persistence, right? Sticking with it. Discernment, so learning good quality from bad quality in terms of information you find on the internet. Questioning, researching, respecting and embracing and diversity. Independence, so I can be a self-directed learner, and then collaboration. And I think collaboration is one of the really nicest parts of virtual learning. So active knowledge making is the second thing that Cope and Kalantzis talk about in terms of why virtual may be better. So consuming information is something we do all the time now, but what we really want to go for in our teaching, in our practice, and as humans is producing knowledge. So that's much more interesting to people. So just making sure that you have opportunities to write and to write well and to get feedback in your formal learning. So you as teachers want to give that rich feedback. Encourage students to write about things that are interesting to them and find ways to relate what your students are interested in to the topics you're trying to teach them. So we really want to shift from this passive consumption to active meaning making. And so workplaces are becoming much more collaborative. There's almost nothing I do with my teams these days that I don't ask for their feedback and try and improve what I'm doing. And taking risks, active knowledge making is taking a risk. And it's a cultural shift for lots of people, especially in my world. I work in formal post-secondary. It feels very threatening to some professors that their students might know things. So I encourage you not to feel threatened that your students might know things. They will know things, and they will be more creative if you give them opportunities to do that. So active knowledge making is one of my favorite parts of virtual learning. Multimodal meaning. And so as pictured here, I can see this beautiful poster that talks about Einstein's theory of relativity. I could read a book about, I can read his original work about it if I could understand it, which I can't, but if I could, I would. So that's really great. I can find, even on the internet now, the primary resource for Albert Einstein's work. Or I can watch a video that just kind of celebrates this idea of relativity. But all of these different means of learning can be embedded in one simple course shell. You can see in our Moodle shell, we've got video, we've got images, we've got text, and these different ways of learning are really enhanced in the virtual world. Recursive feedback, again, that's, really big words from Cope and Kalantzis, but what they mean is replacing this idea of multiple choice exams or tests or writing a paper that gets an A or B or a C, which is just a way of judging a student's work, and replacing that with iterations and loops of feedback. So ask your students to ask their friends, their family, how is this paper that I'm writing? How could it be improved? And this idea of feedback works very quickly if people have access again, but works fairly quickly in virtual environments. It's easy to give quick feedback, to take a look, to use short writing examples to improve people's work, to keep them engaged, and to create social relationships among the students. So feedback becomes very important, and all of this can be documented in some place like a Moodle course shell, asynchronously even, which is so it doesn't have to be live. And again, this is great if your access to the internet is not very regular, not daily. And so this is also this feedback idea, and students creating original work and projects helps with academic integrity, which has become a big issue in online learning in many places. Is the student doing their own work and so on? Collaborative intelligence. This is one of my favorite things about virtual and online learning. We are smarter as a group than we are as individuals. And it's harder work to collaborate and to work as teams on things, but it's such an important human skill because, there's a proverb about it, you can, or a saying about it, you can, if you need to go fast, go alone. If you need to go far, go with friends, right? So this idea that our work, if we give each other feedback and we work together, can be so much more rich, is really helped in virtual environments. It's much easier to collaborate in those environments. Metacognition. So this is the idea that learning requires reflection. It requires time for us to think, what have I learned? How does it relate to what I already know? What's the new thing that I'm thinking about? And where can I take it? So it's our human brains love to do these things. And if you teach online one unit over the course of an entire week, that gives students time to breathe, to learn, to think through. It gives you time as a teacher to see their comments, to hear their questions, to get to know what they're asking. And we all learn together, and we learn together better when we have this opportunity to think and reflect, especially in discussion forums, when we kind of reflect out loud and get some feedback from our peers. And then the final part of virtual learning that I really love is differentiated learning. So this is one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou, super amazing human. But in diversity, there is beauty and there is strength. If we focus on homogeneous, single ways of knowing that come from typically from white males in so much of our learning, we're not getting the full picture. We're not getting the full rich picture. And this is especially important when we take a look at the faces of our learners in any class. No matter how many learners I have, they're all different. They all have different ideas, and they all know things differently before they come to my class. How can I take advantage of that? How can I encourage them all to respect their differences that they each have? And then how can we use those differences to focus our learning? And virtually, we can do that in so many ways. If I have a student in my class who's super smart and who's getting all the things really very quickly, I can give that student more challenging resources, more challenging information. If I have a student who needs more support, who doesn't get the foundational concepts as quickly as another student, that doesn't mean that they don't have amazing talents in other ways. Can they draw what they're trying to learn? Can they speak it out loud? Do they dance? Can they play? All those kinds of things that I want to know about my students that make them different and important. They may not be good text readers. They may not be good test takers, but those sort of very narrow focused ways of demonstrating learning. If I respect the differences of my learners, I can start to open up my own teaching practice in my own mind to the ways that they bring important and great gifts to the teaching and learning process. So I want to make sure that we've got time for questions, but I really just wanted to kind of introduce you to some of the ideas about how and why virtual environments can be really great places to learn, even though there are technical challenges, and even though we may not feel like we're confident in our skills to do it, our students will be our partners in that, and that's where this differentiated learning comes into play. And so again, we're sharing these presentations in the course shell if you're taking the course, but I welcome questions by email, and we'll talk in the discussion forum as well. So it's so nice to meet you, and thank you for your time in sort of doing this introduction.
Yeah, that's a very good one, Jenny. Thank you for such a wonderful presentation. So I'm bringing in Jim also, and people are already asking the questions. There's a question I'm going to flash on the screen right now. Someone is asking the question that what can be done to children who seems not to understand what we teach through virtual learning?
I guess I would start by asking the question, what do you do when a student in a face-to-face class doesn't understand what you're teaching? You would find another way to give that information to the student. Jenny just brought up some great ways of a student explaining what they know or don't know. They could draw, they could write, they could talk to you, and so I would suggest that you start with those kinds of things. I think too that a lot of people have this prejudice that online learning isn't as good as face-to-face. And my feeling is that in many cases it's better, but in any case, it's just different. And different may be exactly what students want to learn. I have I have 5 grandchildren, and 3 of them live very close to me, so I get to, and before COVID at least, I got to see them quite a bit. And they had online pieces to their face-to-face class. And when I would go over, the one who's 11 years old would say to me, come see what the story I'm writing with my friend. And they were all doing it in Google Classroom, and they were collaborating in ways that they might not have a chance to do in a face-to-face classroom where instruction was going on or something else was going on. So I'll let Jenny take it.
No, that's a super great advice, Jane. I think also one of the things that you can do in any class of 20 students or 30 students, I have 5 students who are way ahead, and they understand things really quickly, and that's just because the method of learning agrees with them. It works well for them. It's great to engage those students, and in fact, it helps them feel less bored. They sometimes feel bored and then they get in trouble. So those students that are already ahead and have a kind of understand it, you can engage them to help explain it to their peers. So this peer-to-peer learning, student-to-student learning is very valuable, and you need to teach them how to do that respectfully so they don't make the student who doesn't understand feel stupid, right? But that is one way of teaching your students to be civic-minded, right? We're all in the boat together. All 30 of us in this class needs by the end of the year to learn all these things. How can you, if it's easy for you, how can you help your friend to learn better? So I love partnering with students to get them to help each other.
Wow, that's a very good one. Karen had a reflection, kind of like looking for it. So Karen said, yes, thinking about thinking helps us understand what works for us. So what does thinking about thinking means in this context? Anyone, a response?
Well, one thing would be, how is it that you learn? Do you learn best by stories? When people tell you a story, you get the message that the story is about, not just what happened next. Is it that you learn best by drawing things, by writing things? So thinking about how you take in information and how you like to put out information would be helpful. And there's nothing wrong with taking some class time to have students reflect on that.
Right. And also, as a teacher, reflecting on why you're teaching the way you teach. It's probably because you were taught that way. It's probably because that way of learning works best for you. So here's why my teaching practice, thinking about that as part of metacognition is good. Encouraging your students, again, and Jane's right, this self-directedness, this pull your boots up. Make sure you understand as a learner, as a student, how you learn best and what you need so that you can advocate for yourself.
Now, don't you think that is actually a challenge for teachers that were all trained and developed face-to-face, now finding themselves in the online space and trying to look at how it works all over again in a different space?
Yeah, we're not saying it's easy.
No, it's not. But what it is, you're walking in your students' shoes, John. Your students are confused. They don't understand. They've been used to face-to-face. They're frightened and upset, and they don't, all the things that teachers are experiencing, their students are experiencing. So that great empathy piece that Jane is talking about, and make sure that you've got that going.
And I love the word empathy, because now everybody is shifting, so nobody is an island of knowledge in the other space. So we just have to have emotional intelligence for everyone to be able to kind of like look at how do we get this together, and how do we learn? Everybody is learning in a way, getting to the online space.
And quite honestly, our students are more resilient than we are.
That's really interesting.
Yes, especially the younger ones.
Yeah. Someone asked a question: what resources do you have finding resources for hands-on activities for young children who need to be engaged physically while learning online?
I can tell you one thing that the teachers at my grandson's school did, which they really loved, is they had hunts. So the teacher gave them, for example, for younger kids, if they were looking at learning shapes, they had a hunt, and they had to go find something in their house that was that shape, and then show it to the teacher and the other people in their class. So you can have kids go do things that would allow them to be active, but still contribute to learning for the whole group.
Right, and I call these go outside activities. And so just go out. It's too much time on the computer. Go outside. If you happen to have a mobile device or a camera of some kind, go outside and take pictures and really close-up pictures and really think through connections between what you're trying to teach and what you believe your students might have access to in their environments and in their homes. It's a really great suggestion. I can also recommend OER Commons. Has a lot of really great lesson plans and good ideas for activities for primary school and secondary school learners. It's a really great place to find some open resources for those types of suggestions.
And I'll put in a plug for Merlot, which I'll talk about.
Oh, sorry,
Not wine. But Merlot also has a wonderful collection of lesson plans and resources for teachers to use. And I was thinking about another thing that that I heard a teacher friend of mine say, that she was teaching really young kids and was teaching them alphabet, and then she had them go and find things that started with that letter. Not something that you might not do in a you could probably do that in a face-to-face class, but in an online class, it gives them the opportunity to go, to move, to get, and so on.
There's an interesting question here. This person was asking, how can I manage a virtual class where some students quickly get the lesson and some takes a while? So what do we respond to that?
That happens in every class, face to face. You've got the kid in the back who's thinking it through, while the kid in the front's waving their hand and saying, "I got it, I got it, I got it." So, I mean, that's not different from what we're used to. One of the advantages of online is allowing that asynchronous part, where the students do have time to reflect and think and ask questions, and don't have to do it all of a sudden. So I would say an important piece is to include some asynchronous aspect to your class.
Right. And there are lots of fun tools that you can, if you have, again, this is access to internet and devices. It's fairly privileged thing, but there are polling tools. You can figure out in an online live moment whether or not the students are getting it. You can ask them questions, see how they're doing. It's really important if you have the capacity to record and share those live sessions. So keep them short. No student wants a 6-hour live online teaching session. No student wants that. Keep them very short. Record them. So for those students who are having trouble grasping it, can rewind and say, what did she say, or what did she show? And then if you can, include a transcript so the student can read through it and find the part that they're having trouble understanding. Those kinds of tactics or strategies will help those students who are having a little more trouble getting it in the moment.
Wow, that's an interesting one. Then I wanted to ask a question that when Jenny was talking, you were talking about active learning, and I wanted to ask that, would you relate it to the forces, creativity, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and what is really needed in the 21st century market and all that right now?
Mm-hmm. I think we need much more creativity than we have had in the past. We are not going to move out of the deep and dangerous economic recessions and pandemic problems that we have right now without creative thinking. If we focus too narrowly in status quo, the things we've always been doing, we're not going to come out safe. So the more creativity we can encourage in younger learners. In Canada, our population is aging significantly. We don't have as many young people as you have in nations in Africa. So we don't have as much, we can't tap into that creativity, that joy, that playfulness of our young people as much. But finding ways to respect that and to ask those learners to stay creative, even from when a young age through secondary school into post-secondary, and demonstrate for them the ways that creativity helps solve world problems. And so I love talking about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These are a super fantastic way of engaging students in solving wicked problems that actually are so hard to solve. Put them to work. They love it. They really love a good challenge. When we look at games, gamification, video games that students love, they love solving problems, really hard problems. So finding ways to pull them into that creativity is going to help them so much to establish better futures for themselves and their families and their communities. So creativity, I think, is critical.
So Jane, how do we really think about creativity in terms of making it virtual or online learning, as it were?
I'm sorry, making what?
As in, Jenny just talked about creativity and critical thinking. It's very important. And how does it be an embodiment or integrated fully into an online class, which is really what we're talking about right now?
Well, I think one of the ways is to give students choices. And Jenny mentioned this earlier, but everything doesn't have, every assessment doesn't have to be a test. You could give students a choice. You can take a test. You can write a paper. You can create a play, or you can draw a picture. I remember once in one of my my doctoral classes, we had to read Plato's cave story, and we had to do a response to it, and our teacher said you can do any kind of response you want. Well, I'm a quilter, and so I actually made a sheer quilt with layers, and each of the layers had some aspect of Plato's cave in it, and she went nuts over it. She thought it was fabulous, and for me it was just an absolute delight to be able to do something like that instead of to write yet another boring paper.
And this should be our last final question. How can examination malpractice be managed in a virtual class?
Oh, Lord.
It's everybody's question right now.
Well, there are multiple companies that are making millions of dollars selling online proctoring tools.
Yeah.
Let me just say that. On the other hand, there's also the element of trust. And we can either trust that our students are doing what they're supposed to do, or we can always be thinking that somebody's trying to cheat. And perhaps someone is, but I would say that the vast majority of our students are there to learn and are willing to do what they need to do to show that they have learned. Perhaps I'm naive, but that's my take on it.
No, I have to agree with you, Jane. Trust is really important. And again, it would be very difficult if the assignment was talk about this play in any way you want. If you turn in a quilt, that's pretty much not using somebody else's work. You're not plagiarizing if that's the choice that you make. So giving the choices, and again, realistically from a workload point of view, and we talk about this a lot, it's very easy to grade a multiple choice exam. The computer can do it for you. It's easy. But a multiple choice exam is almost never a good representation of what a student really knows. It's not a good representation of a learning outcome. If you say to the students, I need you to be able to demonstrate or identify or discuss or describe, multiple choice test doesn't do that. I want them to tell a story, and I want them to draw a picture, and I want them to focus on a part of that topic that has real meaning for them personally. And they will do amazing work if you trust them in that way. So thinking as teachers, thinking differently about how we were taught. I was taught with multiple choice tests.
I think the other thing too is that if you have been interacting with students all along, you know how they write, you know how they talk, you know how they think. And if an exam shows something totally different, then maybe it's time to question the student about whether they in fact did that.
Yes, talking with them is a really good way to know what they know. And I understand also in many cases for vocations, there are professional exams in health sciences and trades and technology where health and human safety is involved. There are a lot of very formal exams that are important for that student's safety, for the safety of others. But give them every opportunity to practice those exams in a way that they can take risks and make mistakes without feeling that they have failed.
Gabriel, it's OER Commons, COMMONS, and all the resources that we've talked about are in the Coderina course in Moodle. So you can access all of those things there as well as this video.
Yeah, that's very important, and we aren't going to be taking any more questions right now. So let everybody send a thank you note to Jane and Jenny for a wonderful presentation that we already have, and it's a good starter to our course, the Virtual Learning Pedagogy course. And one thing that is very, very important that we need to understand is This is a 6 week course. A lot of questions that we're already asking would be taken in other classes, in other topics. But at the same time, what I want us to understand is that this is not ending here. This is just the start. You will have to go to the Coderina Learning Portal, the Moodle platform, for you to be able to go through all the resources. In fact, the resources that are already there, it's more than enough for you to go through this week, and you're going to really find it very amazing. And then for this video, you can always ask more questions if you want any clarification. It's on the Moodle platform too. So thank you, Jane. Thank you, Jenny, for giving us your wonderful time volunteering to do this. This is an immense thing that you've actually done. We really, really appreciate it. And we believe that all our participants also appreciate them. Please say a thank you note to Jenny and Jane. Thank you very much. Yeah.
You're very welcome.
Yes.
Exactly. So let me sign you off, and let me just do the round off. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John, and everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we've started it already, and please, we would continue on the Coderina Learning Portal. If you have not been able to get in on the Learning Portal, we're going to work that around for you in the next couple of hours. So don't worry. And if you're already there, you can see this presentation by Jane and Jenny there, and you see a whole lot more. This is a course, and guess what? This is a certificate course. So you'll be required to do some things. There are some information that you have to give and all that. You have assessments and all that. So make sure that you keep up with that. And then for this video, please subscribe to the Coderina channel, because you'll be able to watch this video over again. It's actually on the Moodle platform too as well. So I want to take note of that. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Jane and Jenny. In fact, I could get you on for the next 1 hour, and you'll be discussing, and we'll be having some nice time in what you've actually been able to share. So, and for everyone here, it's important that you start up to go through all of those details and see how you'll be thinking about your class, and how you're kind of like revolving everything to make sure that it suits and learning is promoted. Thank you very much for showing up. So we're going to have another live class next week, same time on Saturday, with another topic. But let us get into the Moodle platform, and let us have a nice time learning there. Jane and Jenny would be providing some answers to us, and I'll be there too as well. So thank you very much. God bless. Have a nice afternoon.